So day one in the Lindsay Clancy trial just wrapped, and we had her ex-husband Patrick Clancy on the stand. So this is going to be your recap. I have lots of thoughts, but I'm going to save those and just give you the straight information that you need to be caught up. I would not be surprised though if he was on the stand for maybe another 2 days. So Patrick enters the courtroom and Lindsay clearly looks distressed. She's trying to control her breathing. Patrick seemed pretty stoic, was trying to keep it composed the entire time. So they start off with just introducing him, asked if Patrick and Lindsay are still married and they're divorced, asked him to identify her, and he actually like physically scoots back and like points to her. And then there's an objection from the defense saying like, this is not necessary. He's asked how Lindsay and him met, and they met in Boston through his cousin. I guess his cousin and Lindsay were college roommates. They started dating in July of 2013 and were married in December of 2016. And this is the moment that you could see him crack in emotion. They ask about their first child and what her name was, and he said Cora, and then he just like looked up, and it looked like he was trying not to cry. So him and Lindsay and Cora, after Cora was born, moved to the 47 Summer Street, which is the home that they resided in until the remaining of their marriage. He worked at Microsoft starting in 2020, and he worked from home, and they had an office in the finished basement. Lindsay had been a nurse 3 years before Cora was born, but when she gave birth to Cora, it was a little bit of a traumatic birth as far as like physically. There was a lot of tearing, a lot of bleeding, and she was on maternity for about 10 or 11 weeks. And he's going to talk about a theme that he had where she had increased anxiety anytime that she had to go back from postpartum with all three of her children. So with the 3-year-old Dawson, he explained that Lindsay also had a traumatic birth because he was breached, and so he came out just not in the right way and was bruised for quite a while. Her mental state, he said, on the second pregnancy seemed just fine. She did get a therapist for a short time after Dawson was born. Then the prosecution asked if there was a moment after Dawson was born that Lindsay wanted to declutter the garage. He said, yeah, they never finished it. It was kind of just an ongoing thing. So curious to know why they brought that up. He said that Callan's birth was a lot smoother and not as hard on her physically, and that after the third was born, he spent a lot of time with the older two, Cora and Dawson, and they would just kind of divide and conquer, where she'd be with the baby and he would be with the toddlers. She showed a lot of stress with different schedules and naps, and she just really would like to have things on a schedule. So the oldest two went to preschool Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Some would be half day, some would be full. They hired a nanny in August, so a couple months after Dawson was born, because Lindsay was going to go to work. So they wanted her to kind of be comfortable with the environment, but then she ended up never going back to work. So in October, Lindsay and Patrick actually attended a wedding, and this is where Lindsay said, hey, I think I'm going to start to try Zoloft. I'm going to contact like a doctor. So he's like, awesome. But then turns out that she actually had already had an appointment and had already had the Zoloft. So when she started to take Zoloft, which it's not clear exactly when that was, she said that her sleep really suffered, so she stopped taking it. However, the one that prescribed it, the doctor, wanted to actually double her dose. So when she was taking Zoloft, before he knew that she was actually taking it, he was asked to sleep in the basement for a couple of nights because she just said that she wasn't getting very good sleep. But then a couple days went by and they flip-flopped, and she ended up sleeping in the basement for what seemed to be a couple of weeks. So the prosecution kind of went hard on this and was like, well, you never actually saw her lose sleep, right? And he said, yeah, that's right. Then they said, were you aware that she actually only took 7 Zoloft pills total? And he said no. So it was after this time that she was seeing Dr. Turfs, right? And then Dr. Turfs recommended that she go see Julie Paul. And Julie Paul ended up actually leaving after about 5 days from that office. And so there was Rebecca, Dr. Rebecca, who was recommended. So she came home with quite a lot of bottles. Approximately 9 pill bottles were discovered in the center console of Patrick's truck, and he took it to the sheriff's department to dispose of them. The prosecution goes down a list saying, hey, did you know that she took this many pills or this many pills? So she took 7 Zolofts total, 6 Ativan, which he said this context was important because they actually switched the dose of Ativan, so she must have stopped taking that specific dosage in that pill bottle. And then Buspar, only 2 was taking, hydroxine, only 3 pills taken, and then trazodone, only 7.5 pills taken. And mind you, this is all in the span of a couple months, so between September 15th to November 16th. Then they outright asked him, okay, well, how many pills was she on at any given point? And he said maybe 3 to 4. So there was an incident on November 16th where she drove herself to the South Shore Hospital because she hadn't slept in 48 hours, said that she was having heart palpitations, and apparently took a weed gummy and didn't tell the medical staff. And Patrick was not aware that she did not tell the medical staff this. And then in December is when she finally told Patrick that she is having some self-harming thoughts, but that she did not have a plan. The prosecution pushed back and said, was that the first time that you heard she wanted to self-harm? And he said, honestly, I can't remember. And then they talked about how they both had access to a laptop of his, and she asked if he had Googled methods of self-harm, and that he said, no, that wasn't me, and he did not click on the link, and that was before she was medicated. He said that Lindsay told him and her mom that she was having intrusive thoughts of self-harm and also hurting the kids, or even concerned about any time the kids would get sick. And he said when Cora had a stomach ache, she thought that it was something more serious, like a liver problem. So when he pried further, Lindsay just described it as more of something that she was worried that was going to happen to the kids, not necessarily something that she would do to them. He said that he asked her a few times if he needed her to maybe go somewhere else, not around the kids, and she was persistent and said, no, I'm just fine. And he said it was really confusing because she would say these things, but then she would act like, making them lunch, putting them to bed. I found this very interesting, that the first time he actually attended any of Lindsay's appointments was December 6th, because Lindsay had said that she might be addicted to the benzos. And 10 days later, she actually attended a day program for postpartum, and she called Patrick shortly after, said the doctors wanted to talk to him, and the doctors said, hey, listen, we don't think this is the right program for her. December 31st, they go to the ER to get referred into the McLean Hospital because she's still having self-harming thoughts. And then they asked, hey, were you aware that she was actually taking selfies that night at the hospital? And he said no. But then they showed the selfies. And this part, he kind of seemed taken off guard. So she got transferred to McLean at 3 a.m. From the ER. And he visited her maybe 3 times, but said that the doctor still had not come to visit her on day 3. And then the prosecution was like, okay, well, would it surprise you that she actually was visited by a doctor in the first 2 days? And he's like, yeah, that would be surprising. And she was like, okay, did you know that she was offered therapy every day? And he said, no. Were you aware that she declined group therapy after January 3rd? No. I wasn't aware, Lindsay asking the doctor to be discharged, but she did ask to be discharged. I believe this is the discharge that she asked because it was going to be her daughter Cora's birthday party. They talked about going to a kids museum a couple of days later and dinner, and Patrick seemed hopeful because Lindsay seemed to be doing a lot better. They go over quite a lot of instances where they are out and about that Lindsay just seems fine. Patrick actually went to brunch with a friend because Lindsay said, hey, you've been sad, like you should go get out, and the kids were just fine. They showed pictures of them at a water park, and the parents actually visited them, Lindsay's parents, until January 22nd. They went to a friend's house for dinner and took the 2 kids, but the parents watched baby Colin, and she was quieter than usual, but then after they arrived home, her parents left shortly after. Patrick didn't find this out later, but Lindsay's mom actually texted Lindsay after they left and saying, hey, I'm just so glad that you're doing better. The Monday before the incident, Cora was having some stomach issues, so Lindsay said, I'm going to take her to her annual checkup on Tuesday. And Patrick was surprised to know that appointment was actually already scheduled. It seemed like he had just learned it right here. He described the day and saying that it was actually one of Lindsay's best days. And the day wrapped with this very eerie fact. He said that when he went to go get takeout, he described Lindsay as normal, but standing in the doorway to the basement holding Colin. And it just is eerie to me now that we know what's going to happen next. So tomorrow, it sounds like we're going to run through the day of the incident from Patrick's eyes.